rehabilitate.
Thanks everyone for joining. We'll get going. Thank you for joining. My name is Corinna Hawkes. I'm Director of the Food Systems and Food Safety Division here at FAO, and I'm honoured to be the moderator of this side event of the CFS. And the division that I lead, we host and run the urban work at FAO, and are very, very committed to that work and to elevating the importance of cities and the urban-rural continuum in the broader agri-food systems transformation and agenda. So a critical agenda for us, and that's very happy to be hosting fantastic panelists for what will be a conversation today. So we're here at CFS, of course, the really important global platform for discussion, for debate, for guidelines to advance food security and nutrition, to advance transformative change in agri-food systems. And what we'll be discussing today is the role of cities in advancing the agenda that is so central to the CFS, and the role that they can play in contributing to the agenda, and therefore the interactions and contributions they can be making and should be making to CFS. We know that the CFS is now engaging with the cities agenda through the upcoming high-level panel of experts report, Strengthening Urban and Peri-Urban Food Systems to Achieve Food Security and Nutrition in the Context of Urbanisation and Rural Transformation. So this is clearly an important step in recognising the role of cities. So the question is about what the role that CFS can play in bringing together subnational governments with national governments and other stakeholders to deliberate on the issues that we face. And we know that this engagement is increasing, with the Union of Local Governments being an ad hoc member of the CFS advisory group, and they'll be represented on this panel today. And of course, the larger context as set out in the State of Food and Nutrition Insecurity report this year is urbanisation and the growing role of cities. And that's not just a question of a drift of people into cities. It's the reality that urbanisation is also a question of the intensification of economic power in cities, of markets, of goods and services. And that means that city governments and subnational governments are only going to have potentially greater power to do good towards food security and nutrition and agri-food systems. And they can do that through impacting their own food systems, through impacting the systems in the rural catchments around them, and indeed to impact on food systems in their territories all over the world, or everywhere that supplies food to cities. And in so doing, cities can impact the food systems of their nations. So we should move from the idea that cities are marginal players to the idea and the practice that cities are major players in driving forward better food security and nutrition through the transformation of agri-food systems. So in that context, we are having that discussion today. And we have a panel that can help discuss these issues and how to take the next step in this important agenda that has been growing and growing and growing. So I'm delighted to introduce the panel that we have. And this conversation, I will be posing questions of the panel, and they'll be answering, and then we'll be moving forward to having questions and some statements from the floor. So I'm delighted to welcome the Manuel de Araújo, the Mayor of Quelimane in the country of Mozambique, who've really been blazing a trail of action taken by cities, and I look forward to hearing from you. Online, we have another trailblazing mayor, the mayor of Chefchaouen in Morocco, Mohamed Safiani. We also look forward to hearing from Richard McCarthy, president of the World Farmers Market Coalition, and Charlie Worthington, food systems lead of Consumers International, and Stinika Anima of UN Nutrition, the Executive Secretary of UN Nutrition. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. And I would like also to welcome those of you online. We do have an online participation as well. And if you want to ask questions at the end, then please do be sending your questions in through the online portal. So let me ask first the Mayor of Kilimani. Thank you very much for joining us. You have a huge amount of experience in this area, and you have really been taking forward some exciting actions in your city to advance food security and nutrition through more sustainable food systems. So could you share with us some examples from different parts of the food system of what your city is doing?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's actually for me a great pleasure and an honor to be here today with such a distinguished panel, but also with the audience that we do have, both here in presence, but also online. But also I want to greet my brother from Morocco, Mayor Soufiane, who will join us because he's really a very passionate mayor, and we've been exchanging views and initiatives. Well, Kilimani City, it's a coastal city in Mozambique with about 600,000 inhabitants. And I normally say, unfortunately, it was built on a swamp, making it very, very vulnerable to climate change and other challenges. And I became mayor for the first time. I was elected in 2011. And one of the things that really struck me at the time was when we were doing my homework for my manifesto was to find a report by UNICEF saying that 53% of the children in my city were malnourished. It struck me because that to me meant that in the following 10 to 15 years, that will mean, if nothing was done, that will mean that more than half of this youth or the young people in my city will either have an unfit body or it will affect their own brain, which will then put them in a very uncompetitive place to compete with either other cities or with other countries. So I took this as one of my priorities to make sure that we improved the food systems and also we improved the nutritional standards, not only for the children, but also for the women and for the whole population. So the first project that I commissioned a team to study the problem because I wanted to understand why we were at that level. So we started with, they made the study and they made some suggestions. And one of the first projects that we implemented was called Kilimani Agricola. And this Kilimani Agricola was a project which was, we were helped by two institutions from Milan, from the mayor of Milan, Mayor Sala and his team, but also from Selim and Fondazione Trinta, which are two institutions working in the Milan municipality, but also in the Reggio Emilia area. These projects was meant to improve the nutritional status of different stakeholders, children, women, but also the youth and the elder. And what we did was really like to start with working at the farmers level in order to improve their productivity and their output. And what we did was to transform waste into compost. So by doing that, we would allow, and also by teaching them, the farmers, new techniques to improve their yields. So by doing that, we managed to improve twofold the output and the level of productivity. But then while we are doing that, we also, in the study that we commissioned, identified that more than 0.5% of what was produced was actually lost between the farmers and the plate. So we had to implement some measures with the farmers to better or to diminish the level or the amount of their produce which were lost. But also we worked with those in the transportation sector, those who are taking the food from the farmers' fields into the market. We improved the way they were making that transportation so as to decrease the level of waste. But also at the market level, we worked with the market vendors, those who are getting the products from the farmers, then selling to the last consumers. We also put some measures in place that would also decrease that level. And at last, we had to teach the consumers the better ways of mixing the different products that they had available so as to improve the power and the impact of the nutritional mix. Because sometimes people have got food, most of the time, it's not about accessing food or not accessing food. It's about how they prepare the food to maximize the nutritional impact. So we worked in the whole channel, from farmers to transport, vendors, and also to consumers. And we managed to decrease this level from 53%, now we are around 40% in almost like 7 to 8 years of implementing this project. The second project that we implemented, it was called Kelimane Limpa. So what we did was to train women and students and young people to separate waste in different, according to the components, so that we could maximize the amount of biodegradable waste that we could then use for the compost. And we had a demonstration center called Compost Center, where we brought farmers, the youth, and the women to learn how to do it. And then they would replicate it in their own locations by having some trainers who would go then to their locations to see how they are doing it and to teach them better ways of transforming their own waste into compost so that they could improve their yields. By doing that, it solved two problems with one stone. One was to improve the nutritional status, and the other was to solve the sanitation problem that we had in our city. The third project that we had was the so-called Coastal City Adaptation Program. Actually, my city is one of the first cities in Mozambique to have an adaptation plan, local adaptation plan. And what we did was to improve and teach the citizens of Kelimane not to cut mangrove. As I said, my city is a coastal city, and because of that, we suffer erosion, both from rain, but also from sea level rise. But people cut the mangroves because they're poor. They need to use the mangrove for cooking, but also they use the mangroves to build their own houses. So we try to teach them the importance of the mangroves in preserving the biodiversity. Why? Because all the fisheries, actually, I forgot to say that 60% of the people in my city, they live in they get their income from the fishing sector. So mangroves are of a paramount importance for the biodiversity and for the reproduction of the different species of fish, crustaceans, and the other sea or river products. So what we did was to, first of all, to raise awareness about the importance of the mangroves, but also the mangroves are the first line of defense against the erosion that I mentioned. So what we did was to come up with projects like to teach the inhabitants of my city how to build their houses without using the mangroves, without having to cut the mangroves, by providing alternative local materials, but also to use the waste into biogas so that they could cook without having to cut mangroves for that aim. So by implementing these three projects, we managed to change not only the level of awareness, but also the nutritional level and also the food systems management that we are doing. Now it's like the right time for us to move forward, to scale up what we've been doing, because right now Mozambique is discussing its first urban policy since independence. So I think that there is an entry point where we can influence national government into including in the new urban policy that is going to be approved issues related with food systems. And we've been talking a lot about food systems, about nutrient level, but I feel that there is a lack at the international community of follow-up. We meet, we sign communiques, but there is a lack of follow-up so that things are moving, so that mayors can exchange their views with their peers, but also to harness and bring in resources that are needed to scale up good examples in food systems application, like what we are doing in Keliman. Last year, we were the runoffs from the Milan Urban Police Pacts award. So we were awarded like the second place because of the practices that we've been implementing in our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I think that is an amazing example of how cities are acting. They're actually doing things. And what I loved about what you said, if I may, is that you really are taking a systems approach. You're taking action across the channel, as you put it, from farm to fork, but you're also connecting problems, you're finding synergies, you're addressing multiple problems at one time. You're learning from other cities. You mentioned in the beginning learning from Milan and elsewhere. You're also now engaging with national government. And I think if there's any example of how you can convince national government that you can contribute to their goals on food systems, then you've provided that example. And certainly some work to do, I think, for all of us in thinking about that follow-up piece that you identified as a gap. So thank you. If I can go now online to Mohamed Safiani, the mayor of Chefchaouen in Morocco. You are president of the World Forum of Intermediary Cities of the United Cities and Local Governments. You're their special envoy for systems. You have a long list of executive committees that you are on, including president of the Moroccan Association for Eco-Cities, and a member of the Global Executive Committee of ICLE, another network of local governments. So a huge amount of experience, and you've also been very active in what you've been doing in your city. So can I ask you, can you share with us what you're doing as mayor to address food security and nutrition in your city? But why is there a need for greater dialogue between cities and the international arenas such as the CFS? Over to you, Mayor.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Excellence, chers amis, chers partenaires, chers collègues. Une spéciale réflexion à mon grand ami Manuel Araujo, que souvent avec lui, on a des discussions très, très intéressantes. Tout d'abord, permettez-moi de vous remercier de m'avoir invité à participer à cet important panel dans le cadre de cette 51e session du Comité de la sécurité alimentaire mondiale. Les gouvernements locaux et régionaux jouent un rôle clé, comme vous le savez bien sûr, dans la promotion d'une alimentation saine pour toutes et tous, et des systèmes alimentaires durables et inclusifs. À travers la fourniture des services publics locaux, tels que les repas publics, la gestion des déchets, la valorisation des déchets, les systèmes de santé, l'urbanisme, la planification territoriale ou encore les transports publics équitables, l'impact des gouvernements locaux et régionaux sur notre accès à des systèmes alimentaires nutritifs et durables ne peut être sous-estimé. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de politique et de mandats spécifiques à l'alimentation. Il s'agit plutôt d'une approche globale et systémique, dans laquelle les villes et les territoires doivent disposer des ressources et des moyens nécessaires pour jouer leur rôle essentiel. J'ai l'honneur aujourd'hui de m'adresser à vous en tant que maire de Chefchaouen, la ville bleue, la ville intermédiaire méditerranéenne de 50 000 habitants au nord du Maroc, et en tant qu'envoyé spécial des cités et gouvernements locaux unis, UCLG, pour les systèmes alimentaires, et enfin en tant que président du Forum mondial des villes intermédiaires de ces élus. Dans ma ville, Chefchaouen, en 2010, tout en croyant sur l'importance du système alimentaire au niveau des villes, nous avions présenté un dossier commun avec 3 villes méditerranéennes du nord de la Méditerranée, ça veut dire de l'Espagne, de l'Italie et de la Grèce, un dossier pour que la diète méditerranéenne soit inscrite dans le patrimoine immatériel de l'humanité par l'UNESCO. En novembre 2010, nous avions eu cette reconnaissance. C'est quoi? Ce sont des systèmes alimentaires inclusifs et durables et sains depuis le champ jusqu'à la table, en incorporant bien sûr la valorisation des produits locaux, des mœurs locales, des recettes locales, etc. Et depuis, bien sûr, dans ma vie, nous avons lancé beaucoup de projets, beaucoup d'actions, et la majorité des actions, c'est dans le cadre d'une approche participative avec les professionnels, avec les coopératives, avec la société civile et avec, bien sûr, le gouvernement national et aussi avec des partenaires internationaux. Maintenant, sur le volet international, en septembre dernier, j'ai eu le privilège de particulier en tant que représentant des gouvernements locaux et régionaux au sommet des ODD à New York, l'examen à mi-parcours de la mise en œuvre des objectifs de développement durable, afin d'assurer qu'au cours des 7 prochaines années, jusqu'en 2030, les gouvernements locaux régionaux soient au cœur de la réalisation de l'agenda 2030 par le biais de la localisation des SDGs. Bien que la déclaration politique du sommet sur les objectifs de développement durable soit forte à certains égards, notamment car elle appelle clairement à accélérer les actions visant à mettre fin à la sécurité alimentaire et à toutes les formes de malnutrition, j'ai vu de mes propres yeux qu'il ne mentionne pas, malheureusement, l'importance de la collaboration avec toutes les parties prenantes pour favoriser la sécurité alimentaire. Et encore moins le rôle crucial que nous, les gouvernements locaux régionaux, jouons dans la localisation des objectifs de développement durable et dans la garantie du respect des droits de tous les citoyens. Excellence, il est essentiel que les villes et les gouvernements locaux et régionaux aient une place significative à la place des décisions. C'est pourquoi citer les gouvernements locaux unis en tant que membres ad hoc du bureau et du groupe consultatif du comité de la sécurité alimentaire mondiale a fait pression pour que le comité adopte les recommandations politiques axées sur les gouvernements locaux régionaux et sur les questions urbaines. Je me réjouis donc que le comité de sécurité alimentaire mondiale, dans son programme de travail pour 2024-2027, mette fortement l'accent sur un plus grand engagement des gouvernements locaux régionaux auprès du comité. Cela se reflète dans le rapport du groupe d'experts de haut niveau du comité sur le renforcement des systèmes alimentaires urbains et périurbains pour assurer la sécurité alimentaire et la nutrition dans le contexte de l'urbanisation et de la transformation rurale pour 2024 et dans l'orientation politique et de plaidoyer sur ce sujet pour 2025. Ces élus se réjouissent de l'inclusion des agendas locaux et attend avec impatience de les relier à son travail vers le sommet du futur de 2024 pour un système multilatéral plus inclusif et un réseau qui renforce son engagement avec les gouvernements locaux régionaux. En tant qu'envoyé spécial de citer les gouvernements locaux unis pour les systèmes alimentaires, j'insiste sur le fait qu'il est essentiel de se demander quel modèle de gouvernance du développement local, national et mondial devrait être conçu pour garantir des systèmes alimentaires durables et inclusifs dans l'ensemble du spectre urbain et rural, et en tenant compte du rôle précieux des villes intermédiaires, où, bien sûr, une des caractéristiques de ces villes intermédiaires, c'est cette connexion, cette interconnexion entre le rural et l'urbain. Il est maintenant temps de construire ensemble ces nouveaux modèles qui soutiennent les plus vulnérables, prennent soin d'eux et nous permettent d'inspirer des actions communes et solidaires. Les gouvernements locaux et régionaux doivent enfin jouer un rôle important dans ces actions multipartites. Je vous remercie.
Thanks so much, Mayor, for making such a powerful statement and for starting your remarks by, again, talking about how you learned in your city from other cities, and that showing this power of cross-learning, this power of sharing learnings and across the cities that are proving so powerful in creating this sense of solidarity, and for calling for greater clarity about the governance model that we need, and for identifying together what that looks like and giving us the deadline of 2025. Very powerful arguments made there for the voice of local government at the international level. And you ended by talking about the links between urban and rural being a very important part of this picture in governance and in creating a sense of solidarity between the different actions that we need to take. So thanks for that. And moving to you, Richard McCarthy, President of the World Farmers Market Coalition. You've got years of experience of a practitioner in advocating for this link between urban and rural. And so building on also the comments that have been made about the need for a systems and systemic approach, how would you say that cities are contributing to systemic change? And what do they have to contribute to the debates at CFS and other international forums? Over to you, Richard.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me here. I am very excited to follow mayors who have demonstrated the kind of systemic leadership that I know many of the organizations I work with yearn for. I am the president of a relatively young organization that has representatives from over 50 countries, and we represent the kind of multi-stakeholder approach that was where we were birthed as part of the Sustainable Food Summit as a food coalition. The reinvention of farmers markets is intentional, and it is often an uninvited guest in cities. Not that they're not welcomed, but they are often expressions of consumers and farmers coming together, wanting to rebuild a sense of urban-rural linkages, to reformulate degrees of trust, and to develop new pathways for reimagining our food systems. And what we have begun to establish as the World Farmers Markets Coalition is a community of practice. I have for 3 decades been a practitioner, an advocate for farmers markets, and an observer and an evaluator, and have recognized that when they succeed, they represent a unlikely alliance that yields a triple bottom line set of benefits to consumers with food access, to farmers with access to new markets, and with communities with curated public spaces that are intentionally organized to be places of learning. And it is in this place of learning that I think that farmers markets provide an opportunity to experience systems change, really from the ground up. They are often an independent sector, usually led by civil society, but it's important to remember that they function because they are places of commerce. But they are not only places of commerce. They are places where we build a new, I'd say, social contract within territories. Now, this often is an uncomfortable mix because the municipality may not be engaged with the surrounding peri-urban or rural region. National governments often look at this activity as tiny, maybe a little happy, cheery, but not serious. But I do think it's actually in this cheery nature of this reinvention of the ancient mechanism of farmers markets that we have the opportunity to actually cultivate the kind of leadership we need to enact these kinds of systems change. So the markets are a platform to formalize what is often informal activity, to elevate the dignity of farmers, and we certainly find that primarily it is women who are vendors in markets and who develop the entrepreneurial drive to reimagine the agricultural businesses around access to markets. And there's an opportunity to really cultivate the behavior change that we need to see that the mayor of Quelimane really described, which is the opportunity to launch programs that need not be huge, but they can be food security programs, interventions that are very targeted. We've seen an incredible rise of the development of farmers market nutrition programs, using tokens, using vouchers to incentivize behavior change for consumers, targeted consumers, to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables. And because these are public spaces, there are opportunities for learning that are not finger waving, that poor people should eat this versus that. These become places where multi-class, multi-neighborhood, regional expressions of an excitement for local food becomes the centerpiece. But underneath, there are structural things to do to mitigate the risk for vulnerable consumers to eat more fresh, local products, and for farmers to redirect their enterprises around greater biodiversity, local consumption, rather than just export models. Now, FAO supported a really extraordinary example of this in Bangladesh with the Dhaka Food Project to develop, not led by local government, not led by FAO, but led by a civil society player, to launch new farmers markets in a very complex city, fast-growing city, where food access and post-harvest handling is a real struggle. So this required an extraordinary level of coordination with municipalities, with local wards, in order to support this work. And there are very many complicated issues, whether it's zoning, permitting, food handling, what kind of space will be allocated under what conditions. This requires a skill set that the farmers markets need to possess, and this is the work we do to try and build that capacity, but also the farmers market organizers' capacity to collaborate with the cities. And I think regarding your question, Karina, in terms of what relationship, what opportunity is there here, well, I think it puts the city in often an awkward position. Are we the regulator, or are we the consultant, the collaborator with civil society, with the private sector that is intentionally mission-driven around elevating local food and food access and food sovereignty by connecting directly consumers and producers? And I think when we create that kind of collaborative approach, we have an opportunity to really project, almost like the tip of the spear. The farmers market can elevate territorial markets as a good, other distribution mechanisms, public procurement, around a model of territorial import substitution that generates regional wealth. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you've given an argument there around the power of civil society, the power of change from the ground up. And again, there's this systemic approach of linking production, consumption, learning, environment, livelihoods, through this overlap of food, social and economic and environmental systems at this territorial level, and the voice that can give to civil society in collaboration with other actors. So moving on now to Charlie Worthington, Food Systems Lead of Consumers International. We've just heard about civil society and making some connections there. You're a member of an organisation of over 200 consumer groups in over 100 countries, and you're focused on ensuring that the consumer voice is represented on the international stage. So what are the advantages that you see for CFS and other international forums for incorporating a greater voice for cities, and how does that interact with the consumer voice? Over to you, Charlie.
Thanks, Karina, to our other panelists and to event organisers. Yeah, I think certainly coming from an organisation, from a network that historically hasn't engaged perhaps with urban governance as much as we could and should have done. I think often, for context, consumer organisations function very much at national level with national government representing urban consumers, but not always plugged into these networks. That does provide a bit of a critical eye on what are the kind of unique values that cities can bring, and that engaging in this urban food systems governance, as we're keen to do more of, would deliver. And there's two advantages in particular to CFS from having an greater city engagement that I'd like to highlight, and again see as being maybe particularly unique or under-recognised. The first relating to the nature of the policy experience and expertise that cities can bring, centering distribution and consumption rather than food production alone. And a second advantage relating to a strength of local governance more generally, and how it holds the potential to include and engage grassroots voices in line with the mandate of the CFS. On this first advantage, regarding cities' focus on the crucial demand-side elements of food systems transformation, I think it would be fair to say that if national food and agriculture ministers tend to start from the farm as their frame of reference, city governments are maybe much more likely to start from the fork, to think from a consumer perspective to their to the demographics they represent and their constituents. What this means in practice is censoring often the right to food, food consumption, healthy and sustainable diets, supply chains and food marketplaces, as we've just heard. Of course, we need all levels of government to be thinking in a food systems way. It's not a solution to have national governments working on agriculture and city governments on consumption, but bringing that traditional expertise, a different frame of experience to the CFS would certainly be of great value. And we've heard from examples from Kelimane and Chef Shoen how city governments are quite a natural locus for action areas like healthy, sustainable diets, food environments, local food systems, circularity, food loss and waste, all things that CFS in some ways is ahead of the curve on. I think this demand side piece, compared to some of the food system summit processes or the Rio conventions, we see often still a strong focus on agriculture, whereas voluntary guidelines on food systems and nutrition and on the right to food here at CFS are a step forward. That's not a reason, I think, to stop there. Bringing cities in would enable even greater acceleration on those points. The second main advantage I wanted to highlight is regarding cities' capacities to engage grassroots communities, which again is really central to the CFS's remit. Justifications for strengthening the role of cities often focus on this growing global urban population, 50% and rising. But I don't think this demonstrates the relevance of cities, but not maybe their unique value. Obviously, we see national governments also represent an even larger number of consumers, and that doesn't always mean this is the right level to engage. I think the real value that cities bring is this connection to the local, is this capacity to work with the communities, to engage and include them in a systematic and meaningful way that would be a benefit by association to CFS, bringing cities into this. To add some context, from my experience at Consumers International, working with our members around the world, we see various different ways that consumer groups and consumer voices are engaged in food systems governance. At national level, it tends to be relatively formalized, where it does exist, participation in consultations, participation of consumer groups on behalf of populations in consultations in food policy bodies, whereas which obviously is essential and often replicated at local levels. But there is a different opportunity for a more radically inclusive model of engaging consumer voices that we can unlock at city level. That isn't always as advanced as it could be. There's definitely room for progress, but something that really should be a benefit that can be brought to the CFS. What this looks like can range from more direct grassroots consultations through to food policy councils or other models for systematically engaging consumer voices and other stakeholder voices in that process of food systems governance. A final caveat, I think, before I wrap up, is that both advantages, and especially the second one on inclusivity, only apply if city governments are effectively and meaningfully engaging and including these grassroots voices. I think we can see there are some great examples out there, of course, but still more progress to be made. I think a couple of calls to action then, first to cities, those who aren't and others working in this space, any ones who aren't already actively engaging consumer groups in this food systems governance process to do more so. Consumers International, our members around the world, very keen to strengthen consumer voice in not just a consultation, but a systematic, meaningful way. And the second point for those already working with consumers is to really think about what accountability means in this context, to ensure that this is built into the governance process, again, not just consultation, real participatory governance in our food systems. I know it's easier said than done, but it's also much easier at local level, at city level, than it is in the big plenary hall full of national governments. I think a real way that CFS can unlock even greater processes of accountability and of those grassroots participation, in addition, of course, to stakeholder self-representation, is by strengthening that role of cities. Thank you.
I think, Charlie, you've made some really important points there about the alignment between the principles of CFS and the way it was restructured when it was restructured after 2008 with the role of civil society and grassroots voices, and that has important implications for bringing in the role of cities, and you've spoken about that very well, as well as this more people-centered approach to solving problems, and the focus more on the people who are eating, which is, I think, a very nice complement to the people who participate mainly in CFS. So thanks for making those really important points. Now I'd like to move to you, Stinica. We've heard there from Charlie about this importance of linking cities into the global level, and we've heard from previous panelists on that. And we've also heard from previous panelists about greater connections between the urban and the rural. And we've also heard about the connections that are being made between different cities around the world in a sense of solidarity. So lots of these connections that we need to make. So can you help us with how can focusing more on the nutrition side, how can that help us make these connections?
Thank you very much, Corinna, and thank you very much to the other panelists for making that point so eloquently. What I'm going to say is really building on those comments, and also thank you for the people in the room for staying with us. While answering your question, Corinna, I'd like to go back for a second to the title of this event, Maximizing Transformative Opportunities Across the Rural-Urban Continuum to Deliver Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems. So it's all about change, it's all about dynamics. There's a lot in there. So the previous speakers did indeed address the multiple governance levels and the need to connect. They spoke about how best to get organized, how best to plan in and around cities with various groups, with consumers, with the platform that is formed by the farmers' markets. And this planning and this coordination must contribute to transform food systems to work better for people, better health, better nutrition, but also for the planet, better environment. And nutrition, as you said, nutrition is about people. It's about being people-centered. It's about well-being. We all have the right to adequate food. And to realize this right, access to affordable diets is essential. And healthy diets are the connecting point between food systems, health, and nutrition. So I think that brings various points together. Then about this continuum across rural and urban areas. We already know from the various experiences we heard, but also from literature, there should not be a divide, there should not be an artificial barrier between urban and rural areas. It is a continuum. And in this context, I would like to refer to the paper we did with a few UN agencies about urban-rural linkages for nutrition, territorial approaches for sustainable development. I still have a few copies available in the room if you are interested. So in this paper, we looked at how the various ways, so for example, through transport, through this economic power, through the value chain, the urban-rural linkages shape the factors that affect nutrition. And this paper also emphasizes the importance of good governance for nutrition, and integrated territorial planning for nutrition, as such maximizing the opportunities within the various systems, health, food, transport, energy, etc., across this urban-rural continuum. I'd like to go back to a few of the principles that we mentioned, the UN Habitat principles for urban-rural linkages. I'll not mention all of them, but they are kind of mentioned in this group as well, sometimes implicit and sometimes explicit. They are locally grounded. There should be integrated governance. And there should be integrated approaches that are both functional and spatial. and there should be human rights based, do no harm, environmentally sensitive. So I did hear this from the various presentations, and especially the presentation from the two mayors of Quilimane and Chefchaouen. So that's a lot about planning, now about nutrition. So this is a strong call on all of us to, when you start planning your markets, planning your cities, planning your transport, planning your urban-rural linkages, what does this mean? What kind of impact does that have on your access to healthy diets? What does it do to improve nutrition, as well as the environmental needs? And I'd like to say here that better nutrition, promoting healthier diets, often goes hand in hand with better environment and climate mitigation. I'd like to refer to the side event we had this morning on the initiative on climate and nutrition. Lina is sitting there in the room. So there was a lot of connection points there, and I heard now also from the mayor from Quilimane that there are these connection points between local planning, nutrition, and being environmentally sensitive. Okay, so back to where we are now in the room. I'm very happy to see that there is increased attention for this topic. So also the SOFI 2023 this year mentioned a lot about the urban trends and these linkages. And unfortunately, as we probably all know, the trends are not very positive. We see a greater availability of these cheap, convenient, pre-prepared and fast foods. They're often energy dense, high content of fats and sugars and salt, all contributing to malnutrition. Insufficient availability, fruits and vegetables on the nutrition part, but on the social part, you include seeing the exclusion of small farmers from formal value chain sometimes, and the loss of lands due to rapid expansion of urbans, which is not quite in line with the UN Habitat principles for urban-rural linkages. By the way, this is what I just said about urban areas and the availability of fast food doesn't mean that in rural areas these types of foods are not available. Unfortunately, that's a negative type of convergence, because we see there also an increased consumption of these, let's say, highly processed foods. On the positive side, we can also see, and we heard this in the panel, we can see many opportunities to deliver healthy diets from sustainable food systems for all, including the increased variety of nutritious food, but also the increasing emphasis to develop policies to create and improve healthy food environments in cities, around schools, but also in this rural-urban continuum. Of course, if planning is done in a correct way. Back to the UN for a second, to give some final concrete examples. Various UN agencies have a quite long history and a growing portfolio of activities to support national and local governments in upholding this right to adequate food across the urban-rural continuum. Just as a few quick examples, WHO and UNICEF are both working on shaping the food environment, either in general or for children. And for example, how to enact financial measures and regulatory measures to really improve that food environment for the better. Looking at FAO and WFP, for example, in the context of institutional buying, also working across the rural-urban systems. A strong example we've heard a lot about is these days institutional buying for homegrown school meal programs, for example. And then I cannot not say anything about food-based dietary guidelines with sustainability criteria. That's such an important tool by default, because it's included in the methodology. These food-based dietary guidelines are context-specific, so they're localized, they're territorial. And when they include sustainability criteria, you have this stone that hit many birds, even though I don't like to say that stones can hit birds, but you get the meaning, what I want to say, I guess. Then finally, there's quite some united work as well. We speak in the context of the Food System Summit follow-up. There's the Urban Food System Coalition. There's the Coalition of Action for Healthy Diets from Sustainable Food Systems, and they all work on these lessons and on the implementation of these lessons. So what I hope and what is needed, that we need more investment in the uptake of these policies at both national but also the subnational level, supported by the evidence to feed back into the policy processes. And that will then create an additional advocacy tool to stimulate local governance to be even more stronger on this topic. So finally, CFS. I said finally at least 3 times, sorry about that. This is the final. It's so good to have another look at this topic with the upcoming HOPE report on urban and peri-urban food systems and policy convergence, because we know the CFS is the most inclusive platform to discuss food security and nutrition. So it is the best platform to include those voices that represent local and territorial based solutions to improve governance for nutrition and integrate those methods, tools and approaches we have and we know about, and that can work to deliver healthy diets from sustainable food systems. So this global committee as such will be able to develop a policy and programs that do work in the local context, be it more at the urban side, more at the rural side, or more in between, or being dynamic, but including those voices will help to deliver those policies to realize the right to adequate food. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for highlighting the opportunities of improving nutrition in cities and through the rural-urban linkages and the opportunity of for the focus on nutrition for building those kinds of connections and for the role that CFS can play. So we've heard then that cities clearly are taking action. They do take action, and it can have and does have a positive impact. And there's also a need for resources and focus on cities in order to enable them to really have the voice and to bring what they can, the potential that they can bring to national processes and international processes. So I'd like to turn it over to you now to ask if there's any particular comments or questions for the panelists. We have around 15 minutes for your thoughts and for your feedback, and very much really along the lines of wanting to think about what the next step is in this agenda, so that we're moving towards moving forward collectively as a community to make sure, as we heard from the Mayor of Kilimani, that we are following up and we are constantly making progress, and we're bringing the attention that we need to bring. Can I ask if Ms. Hala Barakat is with us today? Can I ask you to open up, if you could give some brief remarks after introducing yourself, if you could keep it quite brief. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Yes, I'm Hala Barakat from Egypt, and I'm here attending the CFS 51 as part of the Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples mechanism, within which, we have different constituencies, and one of them is the urban food insecure. And this is the one that I represent here, affiliated with Habitat International Coalition. I'm going to share with you, if I may, a project that I've been working on in Cairo. So I live in Cairo, this mega city. This project is taking place on an island to the south of Cairo. So I will call it a peri-urban or a suburban situation, and whereby a small and medium enterprise called Very Nile is working on cleaning the Nile from plastic. And this is how it started. The problem was the plastic pollution around the island, and also the inability of the fisher folk, who are the majority of the inhabitants of this small island. There are only 1,400 people living on this island. It's called Qorsaya. You can check it on Google. And they have not been able to find fish in the Nile anymore because of the pollution. the water pollution, but also the presence of huge amounts of plastics. And so this is how it started, to clean and give the fisher folk a job opportunity, a new job opportunity. The plastic is collected and cleaned and separated and partly fused, made into other bags or whatever. Now it's expanding, and they have new designs, and also crushed, what could be crushed, and also pressed and moved out of the island. But on the island, they have this, what they call the factory, where people from the island are working within this project. And so it developed into wanting to offer them a meal a day, so that they would remain the whole day within this project. And this is where I came in. A lady from the island came over and said that she can cook, so she started cooking. And then they asked me to come and help improve the meal that's being offered. It's offered to those who are working in the island, and eventually expanded also to visitors. People come to visit, they take the small boat to cross, and you're in a nice green area. So I started working with them, with the women there, and checking what they are already producing on the island. Some of them are farmers and have land. So and also what they're eating, or what they are, that were used to eat before they arrived on the island, because they all came from other governorates a little bit south of Cairo. So together we created a new menu that takes a lot, is inspired a lot from the food heritage of the people of the island, known to the women there who cook. And also now we're moving into creating like a garden, so a community garden, whereby we produce some of the foods that they are consuming. This is also now developing into a market, a farmer's market. So so that they already had a small market, so the excess of their crops would be sold within the island, but they never knew what to do with they had to move out of the island to sell the rest of it.
So there's a lot of questions that
sorry,
want to be asked. So you've
I'm
given
so
a
sorry.
great picture there of this project, and again the power of city level action to address environmental, nutrition, and livelihoods and gender issues all in one package, which I think is always such a fascinating and an important role of these different systems approaches in cities. So thanks very much for sharing that with us. I also, do we have Dr. Anthony Murithi with us? Perhaps you could share a couple of comments if you have them.
Thank you very much, moderator, delegates, and the panelists for this very insightful discussion. I'll be brief and allow me to highlight key elements of the development of sustainable food systems in Kenya in the urban context. Development of sustainable food systems is already in progress in Kenya, in Nairobi and Kisumu cities. Nairobi city is a purely urban area, and Kisumu city is an urban area located in a rural region. This is being done through evidence-based food system strategies and the promotion of participatory food governance mechanisms. The food system strategy in both Kisumu and Nairobi has been developed to guide the action through an integrated and holistic approach. A key element of the strategy is the multi-stakeholder participatory approach. This involves fostering consultations of various stakeholders directly and indirectly involved in the food systems. This includes non-governmental organizations, private sector, academy, and government at all levels. In Nairobi, in 2015, the Nairobi County Assembly enacted the Nairobi City Urban Agriculture Promotion and Regulation Act. This act seeks to empower the residents to practice subsistence and commercial activities. The act provides guidelines on ensuring that the crops meet the food safety standards in accordance with the public health and environmental laws. The number of Kenyans growing their own food in the cities saw a dramatic increase after food supply chains were disrupted during the COVID pandemic. With limited space, some city dwellers began growing food produce in their kitchens and on balconies. All the urban counties, we could call them regional in this context in Kenya, have a robust Department of Agriculture led by a designated Minister for Agriculture, complete with technical agriculture staffs for advisory support. They address the entire value chain right from the farm up to the fork. The urban counties have further provided market infrastructure, and some of the urban counties have supported the traders with free Wi-Fi hotspots to ease transactions and dissemination of market information. Thank you very much, Moderator.
Thank you very much indeed for sharing that other example. Really good to hear of these actions. So if I could ask for some other, there's a question at the back there, a gentleman at the back. There were some other hands raised earlier as well. Sorry, that was the lady in the middle there, and here at the front, and the comment there. So if I could just ask all four of you to share your question just very briefly, if you could, starting at the back, please, and if you could introduce yourself before your brief comment. Thank you.
Buenas tardes, yo soy André Luzzi, también hago parte del mecanismo de la sociedad civil y pueblos indígenas, animado por la invitación de Hala. Y este es un momento muy oportuno porque se va a incluir en el TPTA una línea sobre fortalecimiento de sistemas alimentarios. Y esta visión que sea integral, holística, es muy importante. Es muy importante que las ciudades tengan, por ejemplo, consejos de participación social en la temática de seguridad alimentaria o mismo de desarrollo urbano. Yo vengo de la ciudad de São Paulo, donde tenemos 2 consejos justamente, y ahorita creamos un observatorio de seguridad alimentaria, donde producimos datos para subsidiar las tomadas de decisiones. Y es un observatorio para producir datos en medio urbano y rural de nuestra ciudad, con la participación de las comunidades, de los académicos y también de agentes públicos, que es una manera de crear más calidad de la producción de datos. Entonces, acá estoy con una pequeña presentación que puede ser muy útil para nuestros procesos de co-creación de políticas para producción de datos en medio urbano.
Thank you very much indeed for making those important points. Again, bringing in this issue of social participation, which has been running through so many of the comments today. Thank you. If I could go to the lady there, thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all the panelists. My name is Janice Giddens, and I'm with the Private Sector Mechanism in the U.S. Dairy Export Council. Now, as a former rural food producer who has sold at farmers markets, who started farmers markets, and who frequently visits my own Wicker Park Farmers Market when I'm in Chicago, some of the challenges that I've noticed is the transportation for rural producers to be able to get to urban areas to sell at markets, as well as when inclement weather rains out or storms out the market, or the clientele's aspirations for coming to the market. And so I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about how to overcome some of these challenges and your perspectives on markets and market diversity to make sure that farmers' incomes are impacted as minimally as possible. Thank you.
Thanks for that very clear question. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm Emile Frison, a member of the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems and Senior Advisor to the Agroecology Coalition. I would like to draw the attention also to the Glasgow Food and Climate Declaration that was launched at COP26 by IPES Food in collaboration with Nourish Scotland, and that now brings together over 80 local governments and more than 50 organizations showing what can be done at the local level for food system transformation towards better diets, but also greater sustainability and a contribution to climate. And IPES Food will be launching a new report just before COP28 on concrete examples from these local authorities, what they have achieved in terms of food system transformation. And these are intended to really inspire national governments on what is possible, and drawing the attention on the need to put in place policies that are supportive of local initiatives and not having a policy environment that is actually making it difficult for city or region governments to play their role. So I will invite you to go to the IPES Food website, where this will be published very soon, showing again what local governments at the city or region level can contribute to more sustainable food systems. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing our attention to that and making this point about how city governments can inspire nations to act differently. I think there was a question over here. We've only got a couple of minutes left, but it was a question here.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Elsa Simões from the Permanent Representation of Cabo Verde. First of all, I would like to congratulate the bright experience sharing of the panelists. And also thank you for inviting our minister. Unfortunately for agenda issues, he was not able to participate. My question is geared toward Mayor from Quilimane. What a rich experience. It's a field experience, and this is always brings us very happy to see things happening. My question is geared toward the thought that as we are trying to solve malnutrition issues, we may not want to lose our good traditional practices in terms of food practices. So what is your challenge? What has been your challenge trying to guide this process and getting the support in terms of decentralization of the governance of the food system in your country, and the support you also probably need on research and innovation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a question here, but if I could ask you to be very, very, very brief. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la modérateur. En fait, j'étais le premier à lever la main, comme vous ne me voyez pas. Donc, nous sommes heureux d'avoir écouté deux présentations de l'Afrique. Je suis M. Salha de l'Union africaine, ici à Rome. Donc, je voudrais poser deux questions ou deux commentaires. L'Afrique, effectivement, a le taux de croissance démographique le plus élevé, mais le problème le plus important, c'est qu'il y a une urbanisation rapide au niveau de l'Afrique. Nous sommes 43% de population urbaine maintenant, 48% en 2030, 59% en 2050. Et avec, comme vous le savez, l'extraversion des modèles de consommation, nous tendons à beaucoup plus importer des produits venant des autres pays et surtout les produits transformés. Le Maroc a fait mention des mets locaux. Cela m'amène à faire référence à la question de consommation des produits de base effectivement locaux et notamment ce que la FAO a appelé les orphan crops. Alors, évidemment, nous avons donc deux dilemmes. Comment nous allons transformer nos systèmes donc, alimentaires de manière à répondre à ce nouveau modèle de consommation au niveau des zones urbaines, et de l'autre côté, comment nous allons encourager la production des espèces locales, parce que ça se pose en termes non seulement de compétition commerciale, mais en même temps de biodiversité. Donc voilà mes questions et mes commentaires. Merci.
Thank you very much, and sorry for missing you first time around. I am going to have to bring the event to the close now. I'm sorry. And there are also some questions online about the strategies that projects are put into place to create demand for community members. A point around the importance of improving food safety in the context of traditional markets, and a point about the role of cities in acting against foods which are not so healthy and coming in from the outside. Given that we just have a minute or so left, I'd like to ask you, if I could, Manuel from Quilimane, if I could ask you to react to some of the questions, which also included a question about transportation challenges, the challenge around the support that you need as mayors to take action in the context of national government, as well as the very large challenge that was just raised a moment ago about transforming food systems and the role of cities. So could I ask you to react to some of those questions, please?
Well, thank you very much. I think that's all the questions that were put here are very, very relevant and show your commitment to this issue. I mean, first of all, let me greet my sister from Cape Verde. I mean, we both speak Portuguese, so probably we can continue with the conversation after if I don't cover all the issues. But she raised a very important issue, which is the need for support in terms of research and innovation. Indeed, that's one of the areas that we really have been looking, and we've been knocking doors all over the place, both at national level, the regional, but at international level. Very few doors have opened. So far, we have been working with C40, but also we've been working with Milan Urban Food Policy Act, and with FAO, as you know, the Deputy Director General of FAO is from Cape Verde, and she has been playing a very important role. And Kilimani City was one of the cities which was chosen to be part of the pilot project called Green African Cities. And within that, we managed to include and work out and strengthen the role of food systems in my city, but also Kisumu was there, prior city in Cape Verde and others. So we've been exchanging experience, learning from each other in terms of peer-to-peer example and experience. So indeed, I want in a short term say that we still need, and we're actively looking for support in terms of research and innovation. There, another question which was put here has to do with the challenge that is there while we are trying to improve the mix of food, but also we want to preserve the local food system and habits and culture. Fortunately, Mozambique is a kind of a mosaic, okay, in terms of food, because our cuisine is an amalgamation or a combination between the African tradition of cooking and dealing with food, but also we have a lot of influence from India and Asia, but also from Europe, Portugal. So it's a mix. And over the years, we managed to survive or to bring the three segments of our menu or of our cuisine together. So there is no imposition of one over the other, but there is a local way of integrating the different kinds. I mean, you may have heard that the CNN 13 best world food is galinha zambesiana, which is grilled chicken with piri piri. Piri piri comes from India, the chicken is from Mozambique, and it was developed between South Africa and Portugal. So to me, that's like a real example of mixing of these three segments, the Asian side with the piri piri, the chicken with an African, and then with something coming from Portugal, which is the famous restaurant Nando's, which is spreading all over the world. So I think that from that example, we can show that, you know, we've been managing to bring together the three segments. And my brother who spoke in French, I think he mentioned very well that one of the issues here that we have got at stake is that Africa has got two important characteristics, at least the African cities. One of them is the rapid urbanization, which brings a lot of challenges, including the food system challenges, the nutrition, and so on. But the other characteristic of African cities is the youthness, if we can say. It's like the population of Africa is very young and therefore quite vulnerable to world fashion. So we need, of course, to work with them so that we preserve our culture, but we need to respond to these two challenges, which is the amount of young people coming into the market, but coming into the cities, but the rapid urbanization that we have and brings a lot of challenges. There was one question about transportation. When I was talking about the value chain and the process we tried to work out from the farmers, from the transport sector, from the vendors, and for the final consumer, indeed, one of the sectors that we found is challenging is transportation, because more than half of the food produced do not reach the market or the consumer table because it's lost due to lack of infrastructure. First of all, starting with the quality of the roads, because those cars, they use roads to transport food from the farmers in the rural area to the urban area, but also the kind of cars that we use, they are not properly equipped, for example, with the right temperature or the right way to store those products. Therefore, half of the products are lost, which really brings a very negative impact, both in nutrition, but also in the incomes that the farmers should be getting from what they are producing. I think I tried to answer those questions that I thought were addressed to me.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I ask if Mayor from Chef Chouan is still online?
Oui.
Okay, thank you for staying with us. Could I, if the other panelists can allow the Mayor to close the session today, could I just ask you to make a brief comment, we're right at the end now, around, based on what you've heard, for the powerful call that you made earlier for cities and local governments to be to have a voice in national and international forum, and to have the resources that they need in order to leverage their power to do good for food systems. If you could share any final comments, and I'll then bring the session to a close. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Très brièvement, tout d'abord, les interventions et les questions des intervenants étaient très intéressantes. Moi, par rapport à ce sujet-là, la voix des gouvernements locaux et régionaux, d'abord, moi, j'insiste sur la complémentarité et la contribution dans un cadre de coopération et de travail ensemble. Et je crois beaucoup à la multi-level action, que ce soit local, régional, national ou international. Oui, que le local et régional a un rôle très important pour la localisation des ODD, en particulier pour la lutte contre la faim et pour avoir une alimentation saine et durable, mais il ne peut pas le faire tout seul. Et il n'a pas les moyens pour le faire tout seul. Mais on le fait ensemble, dans un cadre multiniveau. Et au Maroc, par exemple, dans mon pays, il y avait un plan vert, où c'est très important, où un pilier il est dédié, bien sûr, à l'action locale, à la société civile, etc. Et il y a maintenant Génération verte aussi, qui est un plan national, une vision 2030 pour tout ce qui est alimentation et agriculture. Il y a bien sûr l'urbain, il est pris en considération. Je crois que ce type d'exemple, de renforcer cette coopération et ce multi-level action entre le local, régional, national et international, et aussi un autre élément, l'accès à la finance internationale pour le local, parce que ce n'est pas toujours facile de le faire pour pouvoir être accompagné et appuyé pour la mise en œuvre de nos plans d'action en matière d'alimentation durable au niveau de nos villes. Il y a des projets, nous avons des projets Afri-Food Links, des projets dans le cadre de la coopération décentralisée, mais l'accès n'est pas encore facile. Je crois que c'est hyper important de l'avoir. Et je terminerai par une assistance technique. Une assistance technique renforcée dans ce cadre-là, parce que souvent les villes, et en particulier les villes intermédiaires, n'ont pas les moyens, les ressources humaines suffisantes et l'expertise suffisante pour la mise en place, pour une planification optimale et aussi la mise en œuvre de nos programmes. Je crois que ces trois éléments-là nous aideront en tant que ville pour la mise en œuvre de notre politique dans le système alimentaire et de nous écouter aussi notre voix, que ce soit aussi plus écoutée et plus forte. Voilà.
Thank you very much for that. Again, a powerful call for how we can be stronger together with our complementary skills, pooling resources, collaborating to gain financial resources, but also a call from both mayors for technical expertise and sources of research and innovation. So, and then of course the need of multi-level action in all of these complementary ways. So thank you very much for the two mayors for closing off our session today. Apologies, there wasn't time to go back to the other panelists, but your words were very rich and made a fantastic contribution. So can I say thank you to all of the panelists, please? And thanks for you for your engagement with this important topic. And certainly we at FAO will continue to push this agenda forward and to provide the support that we can provide, and look forward to continuing on this journey together. Thank you very much. Thank you.